My grandpa Eddie died 10 years ago. He'd lived a long life as far as I knew. He grew up during the Depression and had a long military career that spanned from World War II to the 1990s. I was 12 when he died, and I don't have very memories of him that would in any way indicate what exactly this man was capable of. When I knew him, he was just sweet old Grandpa Eddie. Granted, he drank like a fish and cussed like a sailor, but he was always so sweet to my brother and I. I'd seen him write in his journal a few times growing up. I never knew why he did it. At least, not until after he passed. Mom said it was just something his therapist told him to do. Said it'd be good for him. When Grandpa Eddie died, he left his house to my mother, which made sense as she was his only child. We didn't stay there often, or at all really. We'd come by occasionally and my brother and I would go through his old army stuff. It was only recently that I came across the journal. I'm going to college in the area and staying at the house with my twin. He's a lot less interested in this thing than I am. "Put it back in the cabinet," he said. Grams was always so defensive of that thing, probably has the story of his affairs in it. "Shut up," I said with an eye roll. The journal is a thick, leather-bound book. I skimmed through the pages of his neat, uniformed handwriting. I closed it and thought for a second. Should I read this? I have nothing but good memories of Grandpa Eddie. I laughed to myself. I'm a naturally curious person. I knew that I wouldn't be able to resist. Call me nosy. I only read the first story that he wrote in there. Holy fucking shit. This has to be a joke. I'm gonna transcribe it entry by entry. My brother isn't gonna like it, but I need someone else's thoughts. Not his, obviously. Here's the first story in Grandpa Eddie's journal. Journal. Entry 1. The first day. I don't know if this is gonna help the nightmares. I don't know who's going to read this. I hope no one does. My therapist says it'll be a good idea to put all of this on paper, just to get my thoughts out. I guess we'll see. It's almost funny. I've got a lifetime worth of stories, a lifetime worth of nightmares. You'd think that I wouldn't know where to begin, but I know exactly which story to tell first. I was 19 the day the Allies took Normandy. I didn't storm the beach though. I was one of the men airdropping in. The mood in the plane was somber. Everyone knew the chaos was about to unfold. It didn't take long for the anti-air weaponry to start going off around us. The plane bounced and shook. I held my breath as I looked around at the men around me. Most of them weren't any older than I was. I was the first out of the plane, my parachute yanking me out of the door into the night sky. Gunfire and anti-air rounds lit up the night around me, and I watched in horror as the plane I'd just gotten out of exploded. The mission had just started, and I was already the only survivor of my platoon. I somehow made it to the ground. Escaping my parachute and gathering my thoughts, I crouched down and gripped my carbine tightly. I was all alone. It was dark. I had no clue where I was. I was raised Catholic. I wasn't a religious man by any means, but the situation I was in made me consider saying a prayer to the Almighty. I knew I couldn't stay where I was, but my legs were heavy. If I stayed still, I'd probably die. The first thing I needed to do was find friendlies. I wandered around, stalking from bush to bush. As luck would have it, the first person I ran into was Sergeant Butters, who introduced himself as I was about to try and cross a dirt road by throwing his arm around my mouth and yanking me back into the bushes. "The hell are you doing, Private?" he whispered sharply. I couldn't get out a response as his hand was still wrapped tightly around my mouth. It was only then that the truck passed us, a truck transporting an entire squad of German soldiers. We lay low for a while after that. Butters was older than I was. He'd fought in the African campaigns, or so I believed at the time. We didn't move out until sunup. Butters outranked me, so when he told me to come with him, I did as ordered. What else was I supposed to do? My whole unit was gone. We crept through the war zone, Butters explaining along the way that his unit had been sent in to destroy a church a few clicks away from our position. His story was that the Germans were using it as a radio station. Along the way, we ran into two other guys, Mace and Jacobs. Mace was a country boy from Tennessee, and Jacobs was from Virginia. Both had been separated from their respective units, both of whom were privates just like me, both of whom were drafted into Butters' mission. I'm glazing over a lot of the finer details, of course. Butters was pretty adept at navigating. He was also good at avoiding German vehicles as they passed us by. We made it to the outskirts of a town. It was more of a village, really. There weren't many buildings, but of the buildings there were, the church was by far the biggest. It was a tall white stone structure. We sat there in the tree line. "There she is," Butters said to himself as he looked the building up and down. He wasn't wrong about the Germans using it. There was a German troop transport truck parked outside and two machine gun nests constructed at the church entrance. Problem was, I didn't see any German soldiers. I also had another realization. None of us had any explosives. "What are we gonna blow it up with?" I asked. Butters looked at me, then Mace, then Jacobs. "We don't have any explosives, do we?" I shook my head. "I got a grenade," Mace said. "We've all got grenades, dumbass," Jacobs whispered. Butters rubbed the stubble on his chin. "I don't see any Germans. You think they're in the church?" I asked. "Yeah," Butters said quietly. Butters thought for a moment. "If we can't blow it up, then we burn it down," he said. It took him maybe 15 minutes to come up with a plan. The plan was painfully simple. One of us would barricade the doors with the truck, while the others would throw torches and grenades through the windows. I volunteered to steal the truck, seeing as how I was the only one of the privates that knew how to drive. We all crept toward our positions. It took a minute for it to strike me just how quiet the village was. I was almost at the truck when I realized that I hadn't heard a sound. It made my heart rate escalate a bit. I got closer and closer, my eyes glancing toward the church, then the truck, then back to the church. It wasn't until I got to the truck that I saw him, the German soldier aimlessly wandering out the front door. I stopped and raised my M1 carbine. There was no way this guy didn't see me. I got a closer look at him. My heart pounded even harder as my stomach jumped into my throat. The man was unarmed. His once green uniform was covered in crimson splatter. He turned toward me. His entrails were hanging from his stomach, and his eyes were both dangling on his face. "What the hell?" I whispered. What he did next shook me to my core. The man smiled at me, a malevolent, evil smile that sent a shudder down my spine. "Private Weathers, kill it!" Butters shouted out from behind me. The man stepped towards me. It was then that I noticed the bloody knife in his hand. My eyes widened as my thoughts raced. I'd yet to fire my rifle in combat. I'd never shot at or killed a man. But something in me snapped, like a primal urge or instinct that only knew one rule: survive. I fired around, hitting the man square in the chest. But he didn't flinch. He just took another step. I fired again, another shot to the chest. Again, nothing. The whole thing lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it felt like hours. I raised my carbine at the thing's head and fired. His brains splattered on the mud behind him, and he finally fell to the ground. "Get in the truck, now!" Butters yelled as he ran up behind me and shoved me towards the vehicle. I did as I was told. Not a moment too soon, I remember being thankful that the keys were left in the vehicle. I hit the gas and shifted gears, just as the doors to the church opened again, and another German soldier stepped out, this one missing an arm and his lower jaw. I didn't waste any time. I rammed him with the truck, only stopping once the truck was parked right up against the front door, leaving whatever monstrosity that was inside trapped in there. I watched as Butters tossed several grenades through the windows, as did Mace. I'd gotten out of the truck with my rifle ready. The first thing I'd noticed was that the body of the one-armed man was gone. That was when I heard the screams. We found the man or creature, if you will. He had somehow gotten behind Jacobs and stabbed him in his neck and back. Butters didn't hesitate, blasting the creature with his Thompson, walking the bullets up to its chest and into its head. Jacobs fell to the ground, clutching his neck. I was about to go and try to administer first aid when Butters stopped me. "It's too late for him," he said before lifting his weapon and firing it into Jacob's head. "What the hell?" I shouted as I raised my weapon at Butters. "Calm down, kid. I can explain," Butters said gruffly. Mace stood there in shock. "You just murdered him," I shouted. "He was already dead. Look, we don't have time to..." Butters was interrupted by a sudden deathly screech that came from inside the burning church. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before. It was louder than anything I'd ever heard before, and I'd been in the sky on D-Day. I flinched, or maybe I reached for my ears. I'm not sure. All I know is the next thing I knew, Butters had disarmed me and put me on my ass. The screeching stopped and my ears rang. Butters stood there with a smirk on his face. He reached for my hand. "Let me explain, kid." I slapped his hand away and got up myself. "What the hell is this? I know this isn't some sort of radio station," I demanded. "You're right. It ain't. It's something a bit more classified." "I'm guessing you aren't exactly army either," I said. Butters shrugged. "I was. Look, kid, who I work for isn't important right now. What is important is that we make sure these revenants don't get out of this village." Revenants?" asked Mace. "Yeah, the dead guys that just came stumbling out of the church. Those are revenants. Newly made ones too." Butters thought for a minute. "God damn it, Megan. Where are you?" he wondered out loud. Mace suddenly lifted his weapon and aimed it towards one of the village buildings behind us. It was an old shop of sorts. What it was doesn't matter, because the woman that came stumbling out was clearly dead. "Shit," Butters said as he tossed my carbine back to me. Mace fired his M1 Garand. The Revenant's shoulder exploded. "Shoot it in the head," Butters yelled as he fired a volley of bullets that took the creature down. It was then that more creatures emerged from the buildings, all in various states of being dead. Most looked as if they had been shot, like the whole village had been massacred by the Germans. We'd been standing at the side of the church, which itself was at the center of town. We found ourselves surrounded. "Stick together, don't let them overwhelm you," Butters said as he readied his weapon. My heart was pounding hard in my chest. I raised my carbine at the nearest revenant head and fired. 1 down. I repeated this again with the next revenant. 2 down. Butters had dropped to a knee next to me and was shooting at something to my left. Mace was supposed to be covering behind us. We heard his screams over the gunfire. I turned around to see that he's been swarmed by 4 or 5 of the ungodly things. His M1 Garand only had an 8-round capacity. His weapon was empty. His body was being hacked to pieces by revenants wielding axes and kitchen knives. I raised my weapon to fire at him, but Butters grabbed me by my collar. "Let's go," he shouted as he pulled me. We found ourselves running down the street and towards the woods. We made it maybe 20 feet out of the village when we again found ourselves surrounded. But this time, not by the dead, but by an entire platoon of German soldiers. As one could guess, we were captured. We were brought to this German camp that was just a mess of tents in the woods about a mile from the town. There, we were brought to a German officer. I never got his rank. All I know is that he was the one in charge, and he went by Jurgen. He was a tall and skinny fella that didn't actually wear an officer's uniform. He dressed like all the other soldiers in his platoon. The soldiers who'd captured us sat us down in front of him as he sat down and cleaned his pistol. The three of us sat in silence for a moment. He didn't acknowledge us or even glance in our general direction. "Did you destroy the church?" he asked. "We set it on fire," Butters replied. And the dead?" "There are dozens in the city," Butters said. Jurgen pieced his weapon back together and sat back in his chair. "You Americans, always solving problems by blowing stuff up. 999. The hell does that mean?" Butters asked. Jurgen said something in German, then took a deep breath and leveled his pistol with Butters. "Where is the witch?" he asked. Butters didn't flinch. "Funny, I was gonna ask you the same thing." Jurgen laughed. "I don't mean that witch. I meant your witch. Where is she?" Jurgen asked. "Honestly, I've got no idea. She was supposed to meet us in town," Butters said. Jurgen nodded, then looked at me and narrowed his eyes. "You're not OSS. There's no point in keeping you alive." He motioned for his guards. He said something to them in German, I assume giving them orders. My heart fluttered as a hand landed on my shoulder and lifted me from my seat. "Wait!" Butters shouted. But there would be no waiting. I was taken to the edge of camp, a big burly German soldier with a pistol aimed at the back of my head. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry, but I wasn't about to let them take my dignity along with my life. The soldier had me face away from him. I closed my eyes and listened to the woods around me. It was surprisingly quiet. I could feel the pistol barrel at my scalp. I could hear the man pull the hammer back. Then, suddenly, the pistol was gone. The sounds of growling and flesh tearing filled my ears. I spun quickly, expecting to see the dead attacking this man. But instead, there was a massive black wolf, this one as big as a horse. I stumbled backward and tripped over a branch. That was when I smelled the smoke. My eyes shot towards the camp, where I could see the tents burning. I wanted to run, to go and try to save Butters from whatever was going on. The only issue was, there was this massive black wolf in front of me, chowing down on a German soldier. I swallowed hard. That was when a hand yanked me to my feet by my shirt collar. I instinctively turned and pushed away from the man, who turned out to be a Native American-looking fella that looked about 60. "It's all right, soldier. We're here to help," he said before whistling at the dog. The wolf stopped eating the man and walked back over to us, wagging its tail as it did so. "Good boy," the man said. I didn't know what to say. Everything was happening so fast. My mind was racing, cycling thoughts like film on a projector, until I settled on one thing. "Butters," I said as I started back towards the camp. I didn't have to walk for very long, as in the middle of camp, Butters was on top of Jurgen, just laying into him with his fists. A woman stood over him, one with tattered civilian clothes and bright auburn hair. She turned to me and nodded. Butters got to his feet while Jurgen lay underneath him. "Took you long enough," he said, looking at the woman. "Sorry, we got caught up trying to disable Morgana's warding, then cleaning up the mess you boys left in town." Butters laughed, then kicked Jurgen in the ribs. "Where is she?" he demanded. Jurgen coughed up some blood and laughed. "You helped her massacre a whole fucking town," Butters said as he kicked him in the ribs again. Jurgen rolled over and smiled. "She's already had her fun. She's already started the next stage." Butters grabbed the man by his shirt and got in his face. "What is the next stage?" Jurgen eyed me. As he did, I could hear the wolf growl at him. He smiled and then let out a bloody cough. "He's not gonna talk," the woman said. Butters dropped him as the woman squatted in front of him. "You know who I am, yes?" Jurgen actually looked scared for a moment before masking it with a smile. "You're Megan LaFrance, the Witch of the Moors. I know all about you." "Good," Megan replied before tapping him on his forehead. His eyes went wide as his body began to convulse. My eyes grew large as I instinctively stepped away. The Native American man grabbed me by the shoulder. "It's okay, son," he said. Jurgen stopped convulsing and his body went limp. Megan sighed as she turned and looked at Butters. "I can't get a read," she swore at his. Jurgen's head suddenly melted into a mush of blood, bone, and liquefied muscle. "Brain," Megan finished. I think that was when I just collapsed onto the ground. No, I didn't faint. I think it was just trauma, maybe? Everything had all happened so fast. This was my first day in combat. My first fucking day. I'd seen my platoon die. I'd seen the dead walk. I'd been captured. I'd been rescued by what I would later learn was a hellhound. I'd seen a man's head melt. And then finally, I'd met an actual witch. All of this on the first fucking day. That's just the first entry in this book of secrets the old man left in here. I don't really know what else to say. I've spent the night reading it. There are stories that span from World War II all the way